So the ceasefire continues, as does the US naval blockade of Iranian ports. But little else is settled. For instance, will Iran allow the flow of maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz? Will the price of oil stabilize? And does the US stand to benefit from what looks like a stalemate? Like you, we have many questions, and we'll try and get some answers shortly. But first, what did Trump actually say, or rather post? Now, yesterday on Truth Social, Donald Trump informed the world that acting on a request from Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Asim Munir, he would extend the ceasefire but continue the blockade of Iranian ports. He said the Iranian government was seriously fractured and he was giving them time to come up with a unified proposal. Now, to this, we saw a response from Mahdi Mohammadi. He's, by the way, a senior advisor to Iranian Parliament Speaker and top negotiator Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. Mahdi Mohammadi called US actions a siege and said that they must be responded to militarily. He also cautioned that the ceasefire extension itself was just a ploy to buy more time for a surprise attack. So where does that leave us? On the brink of renewed hostilities or an uneasy calm? Let's put that to Dr. Sultan Barakat. He's a professor at the Hamad Bin Khalifa University in Doha and has been monitoring this war closely. Dr. Barakat, welcome. Thank you for making the time. An advisor to Mohammad Ghalibaf, the Iranian negotiator, has called the US ceasefire a ploy. Do you think hostilities between Iran and the US could break out again, or do you think we're at the start of a period of uneasy calm?
Well, I think it's a period of uneasy calm, but it's a welcome uneasy calm, particularly by the Gulf countries, because people are wanting now to go to a degree of normality. The challenge, I think, for the global effects of this war is the continued talk about blockading and blockading the blockade and all this will probably do little to normalize the oil prices globally and bring the pressure down a little bit. But it is welcome, and it is expected that both sides will probably use it as a way to improve on their posture, both militarily, in case they had to use force again, and to try and improve the chances of their negotiations. The original round of negotiation was far too short to produce any tangible results. And it's actually encouraging to see, at least on the United States side, appreciating the fact the way the war has taken place, the decapitation of the state that took place in Iran does require a little bit more time to organize themselves to come up with a coherent position on what the future should hold. And also it is encouraging to see them reacting to a request from the mediator, that is Pakistan, to allow more time for the talks.
A lot of points you've raised over there. Let's talk about the oil prices, because we're talking about a blockade of a blockade that is existing in the Strait of Hormuz. There appear to be no signs, at least from the Iranian side, that the strait has been opened. Last when we checked, the traffic was still thin going through the Strait of Hormuz, almost negligent. In fact, there are reports now that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard has attacked 2 ships at least, and they might also be in their custody. So just on the Strait of Hormuz itself, if this continues to remain closed, what does this mean for consumers, particularly in Asian countries?
Well, the United States blockade, as you know, was introduced after the ceasefire was agreed. And this is, I think, the point that the Iranians take against the U.S. respect of the ceasefire, that this is a move that constitutes an infringement of the ceasefire. But by now they kind of accepted to live with it. And you can see the tit-for-tat reactions that's taking place between them and the United States over the traffic. And that, of course, is not going to help the shipping companies, is not going to restore any confidence with the insurance companies, and therefore will continue to limit the supplies going east. And it is Southeast Asia, it's China, it's India that is most reliant on the oil and gas coming from the Gulf states. So it will continue to affect them in a considerable way. but it will also continue to push the price up, the global price up. Now, that is not necessarily negative to everyone. As you know, 1% of the top rich people, including many American companies, are benefiting from this moment. The United States strategically is benefiting from higher oil prices because they've been now able to make it feasible to explore more and more oil and export more oil and gas with a major profit margin, particularly to Europe. It has also made it feasible to export oil from Venezuela that was at the beginning far too expensive to get into the international market. Also, they are using this as a way to pressure China to make sure that they are buying the oil on the international market rather than bartering or getting it discounted from Iran directly. So there are winners and losers, I think, in the continuation of this stalemate. And my way of looking at it is I reckon it's not just a haphazard step by the United States. It's very carefully calculated to make sure that they are in control of what's going on globally and that they are going to come out with a good share of the global market, particularly towards Europe.
There's another point I'd like to bring in here because Donald Trump was posting on Truth Social claiming that Iran itself wants the Strait of Hormuz open as it's losing $500 million a day. 2 points to that. Is this even true, this figure of $500 million a day that Iran is supposedly losing? And if that is indeed the case, does the U.S. believe that this blockade of Iran's Hormuz blockade will force Tehran into a weaker negotiating position later?
Of course, yes. I mean, Iran, like the rest of the Gulf countries, relies a lot on the Strait to export its oil. Roughly 70% of their production goes straight to China. Now, that wasn't necessarily because of the sanctions, was not necessarily compensated at a fair price. So I don't know exact figures, but I think it's obviously considerable, and it's the main source of income for Iran. And this is why, right from the beginning, lots of people in the Gulf were arguing that this is a suicidal mission, the closure of the Hormuz for everyone. You're going to harm everybody. And this is why the U.S. keeps saying, we don't rely on the Hormuz. It's up to you. It's your income and so on. But you can understand from their position, it has become the only tool, the only leverage they have against the United States and against the world's economy is the Strait of Hormuz. And this is why they keep using it. Having said that, they have said from the very beginning that it's not entirely closed. The Iranians have repeatedly assured everyone that everybody could pass except American and Israeli ships and those that are related to efforts against the security of Iran. We have witnessed shipments heading off to China, India, and this is why I think the Americans introduced their blockade. They want to make sure that no shipments goes to the benefit of Iran as such.
Yeah, but then it also has to be said that it isn't simply Israeli or American-linked ships. There are other ships also that have been fired upon. In fact, Indian ships were also fired upon, and then they had to turn back. But then just based on the way things stand right now, and from everything that you've said so far, is it correct to assess, therefore, that the United States has won this war with Iran?
I don't think we could say any side has won this war at the moment. The way it has reached this stage, clearly, I think both sides have lost in certain ways. The cost for the Americans have been absolutely incredible. The cost for the Iranians as well is very, very high. I don't think at this stage any side has won yet.
But by not losing completely, does Iran believe it has won? I mean, the reason I'm asking this is also because we saw images, for example, from Tehran from last evening where ballistic missiles mounted on launchers were being paraded through a pro-government rally. So just to repeat that, I mean, by not losing fully, has Iran won in a sense?
I mean, you could say that, and they could interpret it as such. And I think in the current circumstances, as you could see from the statements put out by both sides, everybody wants to portray themselves as if they won this war. But clearly, I don't think either of them can really come out and say we achieved our full objectives. For the Iranians to simply have the regime survive may be interpreted as a win, but in fact, they have a huge challenge to come. They have a major deficit in terms of trust with their own people. Now they have a much greater deficit of trust with their neighbors. There are a lot of issues to be addressed in the future. And they're still under the threat, both by Israel and the United States, who could attack again. They haven't been able to get a commitment from both sides to stop the war yet.
Okay, so where does that leave things right now? Is the ball in Iran's court? Does Iran need to come up with some sort of a proposal? Or are we just waiting for somebody on either side to blink and then potentially hostilities breaking out? Where are we right now? What happens next?
I think what's happening is that both sides are having to now climb down a little bit from the maximalist position that they've declared at the beginning. The Americans approached the negotiations as if it was a negotiation for surrender, and they had really a very high bar in terms of expectations, both in terms of the nuclear program, what should happen to the enriched uranium, the Strait of Hormuz, the influence Iran has on its neighbors, and so on, the use of the missiles. I think with this round and this extension is a sign that they haven't been able to achieve those objectives. They'll probably be now looking for something close to that, but not exactly that maximal position. On the Iranian side, I would be very surprised if they were to compromise on their sovereign position to be able to generate power using nuclear. But they may be able to compromise on the grade of the enrichment and agree to mechanisms, maybe with international monitoring, where they can assure the rest of the world what they have been saying to everyone continuously, that we have no intention to develop nuclear weapon. So if they're able to do that, that would be a step forward. And in terms of the Strait of Hormuz, I think they need to match that rhetoric that I repeated earlier to you about the Strait is open with the application that they need to encourage nations to use the Strait again. They need to reassure the insurance companies globally, the shipping companies, that the Strait is safe. They need to make available to the rest of the world whatever mine fields that they've planted across the Strait. They have put out rumors about some that exist, and rumors are enough to stop people from attempting to cross. So there are a lot of steps, I think, largely to do with restoring confidence with the rest of the world, that they are serious about what position they declare, and they're there to protect it and make sure it works.
Just one final question, Dr. Barakat. I know that you have a background in conflict management and negotiations, and you actively advise governments and multinational organizations on these particular issues. So I beg your indulgence. How would you rate Donald Trump's negotiating tactics during this war? Are you impressed?
No, I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed by the negotiation tactics. I'm not impressed by the language. I'm not impressed by the what looks more like bullying tactics rather than negotiation. I think the expectation was more of a statesman-like position. But that's my personal view. I'm sure he has his supporters, and there are other people who may disagree with me.
Thanks for that honest response. Sultan Barakat from the Hamad Bin Khalifa University in Doha. Thank you very much, sir, for your time.
Thank you.